You ready to roll?
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to the darkened room of music conversation.
I'm Darren.
And I'm Chris.
And today we have a special guest with us, the Yamaha legendary DX7. All right, so why is this here? Well, today we're going to talk about keyboard influenced music from the 1980s. It's synonymous when you think of 80s music.
Yep.
You think of keyboards.
Yep, and this gigantic heavy slab had a big role in it, and we're going to get to that in this episode.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
So how did keyboard music take over the airwaves and the whole landscape of music in general? And I'm not just talking about pop music. I'm talking about everything from country to alternative to even heavy rock and roll. Keyboard had a major influence over that music. Now, how did we get in that spot to begin with?
Yeah.
Well, I kind of think coming out of the 70s, you had a lot of bands that were either progressive style rock bands that used a lot of Moog synths and organs and all that kind of stuff. And then you had your Journeys and your REO Speedwagons, your Elton Johns that used just regular piano.
Right.
And they dabbled with keyboard sounds as well.
Yeah.
But I think that there were a couple of moments where it was like, okay, keyboards are cool. And I think that it kind of evolved from the new wave music. Now, when you talk about new wave music in the early 80s, in America, they called it new wave. In the UK, in England, they called it post-punk.
Right.
And eventually what happens with every genre of music, it kind of gets a little bit more accessible, a little bit more commercial over time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, you know, early on, the new wave bands, you had Blondie, the Talking Heads, the Police, the Cars, the Knack. These were all cool bands.
Mm-hmm.
But none of them, other than the Cars, you know, relied a lot on synthesizers.
Right.
And then I think around the turn of the decade, 1980.
Right around there, Devo came out with Whip It, and you also had Gary Newman Cars.
Very influential.
Big top 10 hits.
Yeah.
And heavy use on the keyboard. Those songs were almost all keyboard.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, I think that's when it's really started to push into the mainstream.
Right, and then I think another pivotal moment would have been when Peter Gabriel did "Shock the Monkey."
Right.
I remember at that time it was a real industry favorite. You know, label heads and A&R guys were like, write something like that in the vein of that.
Yeah, it was such a cool sound, and it was probably easy to record because when you're programming keyboards, it's much easier than paying a keyboardist and all that kind of stuff. So
that's exactly right.
Not only was it a cool new sound, it was fresh, it was a top 40 hit.
Yeah.
It was cheap to do.
And let's face it, Peter Gabriel, one of the coolest artists ever, most respected and appreciated. Yes. And so it kind of made it cool, you know, hey, if somebody with this kind of integrity is embracing this kind of sound, then it's got to be good.
Yep. So in the early 80s, you had a lot of the keyboard sounds and bands using the keyboard starting to move more into the mainstream.
Right.
Yeah. You basically had two different types of bands using the keyboards. You had your new wave acts.
Yeah.
And then you also had synth pop. And a lot of these bands were gaining popularity mainly because of MTV.
Exactly.
You know, pushing this style of music out, and then radio stations picking up on it.
Eating it up.
And and it became more and more mainstream over time. I mean, you had, there in the early days, you had Thomas Dolby and Howard Jones, Frankie Goes to Hollywood.
Yeah.
After the Fire, Depeche Mode, one of my favorites there, Echo and the Bunnymen, the Motels, New Order, very influential they were.
No doubt.
Psychedelic Furs, Roxy Music, XTC. Bands like that all fell kind of under the new wave genre. And then on the synth pop side, you had ABC, you had Berlin, the Buggles.
Yeah, a little bit more accessible type
Exactly
stuff.
right.
Yeah.
Communards, Erasure, Flock of Seagulls, Eurythmics, Human League, Ice House, which are one of my favorites there.
Love them.
Yeah. Kraftwerk, Naked Eyes.
Go West.
Yeah.
All this kind of stuff.
OMD, Talk Talk, Ultravox, Yazoo, or Yaz, however you say that.
So, So whether it was coming out of England or coming out of America, most of the keyboard stuff kind of of fell into these categories if they were playing rock music.
Exactly right.
Yeah. And then what's kind of interesting is, we've talked several times about how a lot of these same sounds have come back now. And to not get too sidetracked here, they have a whole new genre now called synth wave, which is kind of influenced from new wave and synth pop. They put it together, it's synth wave. So we'll talk more about that later.
Yeah, and another one that's kind of in the underground, hadn't really gained a lot of popularity yet, is something called vaporwave.
Yes.
So yeah, that's kind of bubbling under right now. They're using a lot of these old sounds from back then, and even sampling some of these songs to a certain degree.
Very true.
And creating new like EDM style tracks.
All right, so in 1983, this little guy right here came into fruition, and it was one of the very first, if not the first, keyboard that had what they call FM synthesis, which basically gave you the ability to create sounds that sounded more realistic. It also gave you the ability to program your own sounds from a keyboard, which was cool.
Yeah.
And it also gave you the ability to program multiple layers of keyboards, which is really nice. So if you only had one keyboardist in the band, whether, instead of just playing one part, he could actually program stuff in here that he could play along with or stack it up and everything. So producers early on was like, hey, this is pretty cool. We don't have to pay like 4 coke-headed, keyboard players to diddle around and screw around all day. You could have one guy outside the studio program the parts and then come in and you're done.
Yeah.
So that is kind of how that came to be. So early on in 1983, one of its biggest allies, and still to this day, is Brian Eno, who was a musical genius.
Yes.
And Brian, he got the manual, he broke it all down, he figured out how to program this thing, which was really cool. He made a whole record in 1983 that was just using these sounds primarily.
Nice.
And I think it was called Apollo or something like that. And it's a very cool recording. So he was early on. He was the one that was from the ground floor. He loved this thing, used it all the way. He still uses it to this day, in fact.
Yeah.
It showed up on records that he produced, sometimes in subtle ways, like U2, the Joshua Tree and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But by 1984, it started showing up on hit records, and that was when it really, came to prominence. You had songs like What's Love Got to Do With It by Tina Turner, also Hall & Oates' Out of Touch. You had Whitney Houston, like Saving All My Love for You. All these songs, topping the charts with sounds that came from this guy right here. So that, anytime in popular music, it's a lot of times it's copycat, follow the leader. People took notice.
Yeah. Soon after, 1984-ish, you started to hear keyboards moving more and more into the mainstream. You're hearing it all over the radio. Yeah. On such hits like Aha, Take On Me. That came from this keyboard here. Also, Tarzan Boy. Well, why is this on this list? But it was used with this keyboard, right?
Exactly.
Heaven is a Place on Earth, Belinda Carlisle, one of my favorite from the 80s.
Yeah, I know
Eyes
like her.
Yeah, she was hot. Eyes Without a Face, The Way It Is, Bruce Hornsby. Hard Habit to Break from Chicago.
Yeah.
Night Shift from the Commodores.
Love that song.
Oh, yeah. Don't Dream It's Over, Crowded House. And the list goes on and on. So this is so long. I'm just gonna scroll them on the screen here.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then also a lot of the bass sounds from that you could hear on a ton of songs like Danger Zone. The bass sound in Shout by Tears for Fears.
There you go.
That came from this very keyboard as well. So this thing was kind of taken over. And for about a 5-year span, it was on. And I read this. I don't know how to verify this, but I actually read across all genres of music, whether it be country, pop, rock, this keyboard appeared on 61% of the charting songs that was on the charts.
Wow, there you go.
Pretty crazy. Yeah. So overnight, when this thing started showing up on hit records, a lot of artists who are very integral, very popular artists at the time, instantly made a switch to keyboard-oriented and directly to this instrument to record their music. So I can give you some like prime examples here. Yeah. Tom Petty went from Long After Dark, the one with You Got Lucky, that's all analog synth sounds, to Southern Accents, had a lot of DX7 on it.
Yeah.
Genesis, the self-titled album, to Invisible Touch.
Yeah.
There's another example. Billy Joel, Innocent Man, to The Bridge. The bridge was loaded with this thing. Pete Townsend, another great example, went from All the Cowboys Have Chinese Eyes to White City, a novel, loaded with DX7. Al Jarreau, one of the best artists of that genre, went from Breaking Away to High Crime. Chicago 16 to Chicago 17.
Excellent example there, yeah.
Michael McDonald, If That's What It Takes, you know, the one with I Keep Forgetting, to No Looking Back.
Yeah.
The Pretenders, Learning to Crawl to Get Closer. Kenny Loggins, High Adventure to Vox Humana. So these were like major artists. I mean, most of these were on We Are the World, for example. So that's how popular they were.
Yeah.
Embrace this instrument. It's on Michael Jackson record. So this thing really, really, really was like the 808 drum machine of keyboards.
Right.
At the time.
Just completely overused eventually as time went on. So yeah, as the decade wore on, you know, people started to kind of get tired of this keyboard sound. It started to sour on them a little bit.
Yeah.
We did mention in our 2 episodes where we were defending 2 different songs, We Built This City and Party All the Time. We kind of hinted on that.
Yeah.
You looked at the music charts. That was the sound of the time, and it doesn't age well.
Yeah, and I think one of the problems too was I think like most producers and musicians, and maybe they just weren't capable like Brian Eno of actually going in here and programming it.
Right.
They just used the stock sound, so you heard the same sounds over and over again.
Yeah, so when you got up into the very late 80s, I mean, people were sick of this sound. Things were sounding the same.
Exactly.
Things were getting really, really bland. When did they stop making this thing?
Well, oddly enough, they stopped making it in 1989, right at the end of the decade. Sounds like a good
about a good time to do that, yeah.
And then all these years later, the most ironic thing ever is that it's come back around.
Yeah.
You know, these people buy these things like crazy. They're used on a lot of modern records. And, you know, it's like the old saying, you know, if you stick around long enough, you get respect. What do they say? Ugly buildings, politicians, and whores, they all get respected if they're around long enough. And I guess you could say the same thing about the DX7.
That's the first time I've heard that saying. I like it, though. I'm going to start using it from now on. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought it would be fun, too, to take a look at some of the newer artists that embrace this kind of sound.
Yeah.
Because it's all over the radio again.
Yeah. All right. So the current artists kind of using keyboard sounds now. Not specifically this, but, you know, many from this, but just a general keyboard sound, and you know, people that are starting to bring it back. One of our favorites, Tame Impala.
Love
it. The Weeknd, love The Weeknd, and Dua Lipa. The 1975.
Excellent.
Little Mix, Chromeo, Halsey, which I really love her voice.
Amazing.
And of course, you know, like the Killers and Daft Punk have used the keyboard sound all through their career. So yeah, you're hearing it all over new modern music. You know, I was going to say the radio, but you know, on the internet, streaming. You know, getting lots and lots of streams. This sounds back. It's just as popular as it was before.
Yeah, and it's so crazy the hatred for this instrument. Go online and just look this up, and you'll immediately see musicians chiming in that, I was in the music industry back then. I hated that damn thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it was not well and highly thought of back then.
Yeah. Well, like with anything, any kind of trend that comes along, you have a lot of people that are just holdbacks. They're purists. You know, they don't want to hear anything outside of the realm of what they're comfortable with. You know, like a lot of people really, really criticized ZZ Top for the electronic sound of Afterburner. Yeah. And you know, it's just, you know, it was an experiment for them. You know,
Sound of the times.
Eventually, they went back to their old sound, but you know. Good for them for trying something different, you know? You know, throwing in some new sounds and experimenting. There's nothing wrong with a band doing that.
Van Halen in the 80s.
Exactly right. Yeah, that was a big a feud between David and Eddie.
For sure.
You know, David Lee Roth didn't want to use any keyboards.
Right.
But, man, if he hadn't compromised, we wouldn't have the classics that came off in 1984.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so to wrap up, this keyboard has had a very interesting history, and it's still, you know, having an impact on modern music even to this very day. With varying results, I would say. But I personally like a lot of the sounds. I like what it was capable of. And I think there was some great music that came out, and then, you know, there was some garbage too. But that's within any genre.
Right. Exactly.
But I don't think that there's many pieces of equipment that came down the pike that stretch had the overreaching broad influence that it had and impact that it had on the different genres.
Yeah, maybe not since the electric guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us what you think. You know, did the DX7 ruin music in your opinion, or did it add great texture? Drop it in the comments. Let us know what you think.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, trivia time, and it's time to go to the DVD again.
All right.
Name that group is what we're going to do. So let's get it called up here. You ready?
I am ready.
All right. Test our knowledge.
Let's see what we got. Delamitri.
Delamitri. Is it?
I don't know.
I thought that was a 90s song.
I think their first album was in the 80s.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm stumped on this one.
He looks like the Delamitri guy.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Way to go. See, you got one that I didn't. So.
And I saw them live. They opened for U2 back then. And
okay.
I believe Bono was very instrumental in getting them signed and all that stuff.
Very nice. There you go. All right, round 2. Here we go.
Round 2.
Sowing the Seeds of Love?
Correct. Tears for Fears.
Very identifiable video here for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this, I've said it before, this is a song I didn't like as well by them.
Yeah. I liked it pretty good, but in retrospect, I don't like it nearly as good as their other stuff.
Right, yeah.
All right, round 3.
Round 3, here we go. I do know this. I remember seeing this video. What is this? Haven't seen any band members yet, which helps.
Yeah.
Or this might be one of those videos where they don't show the band.
I really don't know what this is.
I've seen this before. What is it? Philip Oakley and Giorgio Moroder. Yeah.
I would have never.
I can't remember which song this is. Okay.
But she had a lot of success, Giorgio Moroder, starting out with Donna Summer, and then so many soundtrack songs in the 80s.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, I guess this wraps it up for this episode.
All right.
We'll be back again with another one very soon.
See you then.